Good afternoon. I'd like to begin by thanking the organising committee and especially Dr. Adolfo Rodriguez for inviting me to come here and share experiences and ideas with you today and this week. Many of you know CABI as a publisher, but CABI is actually involved across the spectrum in the area of agriculture and the environment. In addition to being a specialised academic publisher, we carry out primary research, especially in the areas of molecular biology, plant pathology, and control of invasive species. We also implement projects around the world in agriculture and environment, especially focusing on developing country agriculture. So I'd like to share some of our experiences from initiatives that we've been involved in looking to apply information and data in agriculture in developing countries. To begin with, it's important to highlight the importance of being smarter about the way that we approach agriculture. Already, nearly 1 billion people go hungry, and around 40% of the crops produced is lost to plant pests and diseases. This is only going to become more difficult into the future, with the population expected to reach 9 billion by 2050, and climate change altering the weather that farmers have to deal with, and the range of pests that attack their crops. We're going to need to produce more food with fewer resources in a more challenging environment. Knowledge is key to being able to do that. So, to make good decisions in agriculture, everyone needs access to data and information. And as Gerardo highlighted in the previous panel, we need to understand who these clients are and what their information needs are. As important as that is in the context of a library and understanding the users of our library, it becomes even more difficult when we start to think about how do we bring the library to people who will never set foot in an academic library. So we actually have made posters with profiles of all of these people who we consider our key clients, and we have them on the wall in our offices looking over us every day to make sure that we stay focused on getting the information that they need. So just a couple of highlights for you to see the kind of differences that different types of actors in agriculture need the information that they need to access. Policymakers tend to need very high-level summaries. Maybe they want production statistics. Maybe they want forecasts, maybe of the weather, maybe of pests and diseases, so that they can produce their strategies. Researchers need to know where the research gaps are, so that they can focus their investigations and address those gaps. They also need to be able to access the existing body of knowledge, so that they can build upon it. Extension workers, the people that give advice to farmers, need to know what technologies are available to recommend. They need to know what are the best practices. And they need to be able to look up solutions to the problems that farmers that they work with encounter, often problems that they've never seen before. Input suppliers need information about what crops and pests are grown in the area where they're working, so that they know what products they need to stock. And farmers, both small-scale and industrial farmers, need access to a whole range of information about everything from weather to market prices to pest control to crop varieties to soil health and more, so that they can make adequate decisions at every stage of the cropping cycle. For all of these actors, actually accessing the information that they need is a key constraint. Particularly in developing country agriculture, it can be very, very difficult from the smallest of the small-scale farmers up to the Minister of Agriculture to access the information that people need to make the right decisions. So we're going to look at a couple of reasons why that's difficult and a couple of the key constraints that are faced to using information more effectively in agriculture in developing countries. We find that the dissemination and use of information is often ineffective, and that limits potential for growth. So a couple of the key areas that we're going to look at is the way that research outputs are archived and disseminated, the way that people who need information access it, and the types of formats that information is held in. But through developing partnerships between librarians and information specialists who have the solutions to archiving, disseminating, indexing, everything that you guys do every day in your libraries in working with information, working in partnership with the agricultural sector, we can strengthen the way that they handle information and improve the access that actors across the sector have to the information that they need to make effective decisions and improve food security. So looking at each of these challenges, we're going to look at some of the ways that libraries and information specialists can contribute to improving the way that information and data is handled and applied in the agricultural sector in developing countries. So starting off with research outputs, they're often published in local journals, national journals, printed in hard copy only, limited distribution, or maybe in project reports that sit on a shelf somewhere. So one of the things we need to be looking at doing is how can we work with the agricultural sector to help them move towards having searchable repositories of this information so that it can be accessed by people anywhere in the country and even in other countries that need it as well. Which links nicely with the next challenge of people not being able to access the information that they need. Extension workers and others who give advice to farmers have very little access to reference materials, and farmers have even less. A lot of the information that they need is in libraries, but these are not our traditional audience. These are not the people that we see every day in our academic libraries, so we need to figure out how we can get that information to them so that they can apply it in improving the way that they go about growing crops for all of us. Right? And again, this comes into partnerships with the agricultural sector. These aren't our traditional clients, but they are the traditional clients of extension services and others who give advice to farmers. So if we work with them to make sure that they have the information they need, then they can make sure that the farmers have the information that they need. The last one I want to look at is the way that information is held. So even where we see people moving beyond holding information research outputs in hard copy, agriculture projects that try to make document repositories, for example, online of information, often just put up PDFs with an index, and that's all. But you do see some examples where they have involved information specialists and librarians in designing the repository, and all of a sudden they have metadata. All of a sudden the information is much better structured. So we can work as well with the agricultural sector in making sure that information is held in sensible ways so that it will be compatible with other formats, so that it can be broken down and reused, presented in different ways for different audiences. So I'd like to give a couple of examples of initiatives that we've been in of applying knowledge management in developing country agriculture and some of the lessons that we've learned from that. So the first one I want to look at is the Global Agricultural Research Archive, which is an open access online repository for research outputs from developing countries. So we work with a couple of governments, Malawi, Pakistan, Philippines, to take information that they had only in hard copy, years and years and years of their national agricultural research journals, books and other research outputs, to digitize it all, get it online in an open access repository so that it will be archived for posterity, it won't get lost when the last paper copy goes missing, and it can be accessed by anyone that needs that information, both in those countries and in others. Another one we want to look at really addresses that third constraint about holding information in sensible formats and compatible ways. CIARD is a consortium. It's a network of pretty much all of the organizations that work in information for agriculture. CABI is one of the members. And what CIARD does is pushes to make this information more available, to maximize the reach of it through open access and common standards. So looking at developing common standards for the way that information is held, so that the information can be interoperable with other systems and more discoverable. The last one I want to look at is the Plant-Wise Knowledge Bank. So this is the database that I manage. It is part of a broader agricultural project on improving pest management in developing countries. We're in 33 countries, 6 of which are in Latin America. And it's really through embedding this information resource in an agricultural project that we're able to reach much more effectively the people that need this information. So if CABI, as our publishing arm, had just produced it and put it online, people would have found it. But by being incorporated in this agricultural project, being incorporated in the training that extension officers receive about how to look things up and where to look for information, it has a much more solid integration with people that are giving advice to farmers. So the Knowledge Bank is an open access information hub with interactive tools for identifying plant pests and looking at solutions for how to manage them. And one of the things that we discovered when we started to build this is a very different audience than CABI's traditional audience. We make a lot of databases for academics. And in with this one we're targeting developing country extension workers. We're targeting people who spend all of their time in the field talking to farmers. So we need to look at not only what information do these people need, in addition to hosting information that was developed as part of this project, we've repurposed information from some of CABI's other databases, but made it much more focused. So what is different about how extension workers access information? What information do they need? And we discovered talking to them, they need much more focused information. They don't need all of the biology and the life cycle of the pest. They want to know how to identify it and how to make it better. So writing things at a lower technical level, more focused, and making it available in many different ways. So some extension workers are online some of the time. This is an online resource, but we also needed to develop many ways that they can access this information without being on the internet. So we have an Android app that works without an internet connection. We are putting this information into agro-advisory services, the types of services that farmers subscribe to and get SMS messages to their phone. We've made tools on the website where you can download and print booklets. We're making a USB stick that has all of the information offline with an index. So again, thinking about the same information, but targeting the delivery channel to the audience that it needs. The other side of the Plant-Wise Knowledge Bank, in addition to providing information, is we're really looking at applying data and decision-making in agriculture. So there's some data that's collected from the field as part of this project that we're a part of, but we combine that with other data sets, weather, soil, crop distribution, pest distribution, for analysis and modeling. So some of the things that we've done with that, we published a couple of papers with university researchers in the UK about how the range of pests is likely to change with climate change. We're working in Kenya to develop a predictive model that will be able to tell when there are going to be pest outbreaks for key pests, depending on what the medium-term weather forecast is, and will allow the government to respond more quickly. So a couple of the key lessons that we've drawn from all of this, beginning with lessons about partnership, really. And the first one really comes back to what Dr. Matarasa mentioned in his opening about people seeing the value of data. And this is something that we've had to put a lot of work in on Plant-Wise. Before you can convince a government to invest in handling information more systematically and applying data in their decision making, you need to convince them that it's worth it. You need to get people to see the value of data. So we've had to put in a lot of work in building these partnerships to get people thinking about how they want to apply the data, how it could make them more effective in their jobs, how it could make their jobs easier. But then once you've got people convinced, we still have the fact that capacity for handling information, the key information skills like synthesizing, cataloging, organizing, archiving, sharing information, the things that are central to what we do in the library sector, are often very weak in the agricultural sector. So we need to look at these partnerships and how we can bring those skills into the agricultural sector to make them more effective in the way that they handle information. Some other lessons that we've learned as well in developing information resources for the agricultural sector in developing countries. And again, I keep coming back to really knowing the audience and knowing how your audience accesses information and what kind of information they need. When we started identifying what we would need to do to reach an audience of developing country extension workers, one of the first things that we came to was that this information resource needs to be open access. One of the key constraints that faces extension services in developing countries is a lack of resources. That's one of the main reasons why they already don't have the information that they need. They're not going to be able to subscribe to a paid resource. So it needed to be open access, which brings its own challenges. If you're building open access resources, you need to figure out how you're going to keep them going, where you're going to get the money to build them. But to reach this audience, it needed to be open access. We also identified, as we went through, when we quickly looked at the different stakeholders, the different kinds of information that people need. And there's a huge variety in the kinds of information that people need and the ways that they access it, even within just the agricultural sector. If we made a specific, entirely new database for every audience, that's going to become very, very difficult. So you need to be looking at ways that we can leverage existing infrastructure. So for example, GARA, the Global Agricultural Research Archive, where we helped several developing country governments digitize their national agricultural research outputs, that is built on CABI's core database. That information sits within the core full-text database. When you enter the GARA website, that gives you a filtered view onto just those records. Same thing with the plant-wise knowledge bank. That's built on existing infrastructure. It just gives you the right view for the right user. So we need to be looking at ways that we can have multi-use content, hold content in flexible ways, and present the right information to the right users. So in summary, we need to build strong partnerships between librarians and information specialists and the agricultural sector so that we can strengthen the way that knowledge management is carried out in the agricultural sector and improve the access that everyone involved in agriculture has to the information that they need to make effective decisions. So librarians and information scientists have the skills to make this happen. So we need to be looking at how we can build those partnerships going forward. Thank you.